Good evening. I am Joe Rossetti, Chairperson of the Central Middle School Building Committee. It is 7 p.m., 29 October 2024, and this is the Central Middle School Community Engagement Forum number 7. I'm calling this meeting to order, and if you're, I'd like to have you join us and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you're able, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all. Thank you again for joining us tonight to hear and share our progress towards the new Central Middle School. I expect our presentation and question and answers will probably last about 1 hour, give or take. And given that, I would like to let you know that who's represented this evening from our team. Again, I'm the chairperson, Joe Rossetti. Vice chairperson is Claire Kilgallen. We have several of our building committee members also joining us. I know Laura Costin is, Tony Turner, and Joe Kelly. And I expect a few others will join us as the meeting progresses. With respect to the outline, item number 2, building and site design, will be addressed by SLAM Architects, Steve Martocchio. Item number 3, the project timeline update and project costs, will be addressed by JLL Owners Representative Peter Rader, Jose Cardozo, and John Munich. And item number 4, Central Middle School and Community Safety Site Logistics and Phasing Plans, will be presented by Tim Kleps from Turner Construction Company. And the Q&A will be a variety of participants from our group. We do have some qualitative goals that our team has kept in mind for long-term and during the construction process. Key goals are: 1 is first-class education facility for the community, keeping in mind safety for our children, family, staff, community, and the construction team throughout the construction process, and have a safe facility thereafter. To be good neighbors while we're building the school and also thereafter, and to promote community awareness. Some key facts and figures I'd like everyone to take away from this, from our presentation. The town of Greenwich appropriated a little more than $112 million in this spring to build the school. We are within the budget right now, and that's good news. Additionally, the Connecticut State Department of Administrative Services has committed to reimburse the town approximately, maybe a little more than $22 million. This is significantly more than we had projected to receive, about $14 million more than we projected to receive. That is great news, and we want to give special thanks to our Greenwich State Delegation representatives. Currently, the team is in the permitting process with some town agencies. We expect to do a groundbreaking in December 2024, a construction start in January of 2025, just a few months away, and a new school occupancy in late summer 2026. After our presentation in the forum, if you find that you'd like to get more information or keep more abreast of what's happening, please go to the Greenwich Public Schools website. There's plenty of information there, and contact information as well, or attend our bi-weekly building committee meetings, which are every Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, and our next one is on 5 November. They are mostly virtual. They are virtual and hybrid, so you can come in person or join us online. And by the way, I just want to make one last comment. This meeting is totally virtual. There's no in-person grouping, so that everybody's on by computer. And having said those comments, I'm going to turn the meeting over to our moderator, Peter Rader from JLL. Peter, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone. The entire project team's excited to present you guys tonight an update on the project status. We've got some great news on the front, and Joe mentioned a little bit of that. Just as a reminder, Peter Rader, a senior vice president with Jones Lang LaSalle. We are the owner's rep on the project and are leading the project team through the design and construction efforts here. As we move through the agenda items this evening, the first is an update around the building site design, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve from the SLAM Collaborative to run us through that. Steve?
Thanks, Peter. Go to the next slide, Jose. So many of you who have been on these at these meetings previously have seen this, but for those who haven't, we wanted to do just a brief overview of where the project is headed. So as you look at the site, this is our final completed project. A handful of things that are worth noting here. The new athletics fields sit on roughly the same piece and parcel of the property where the current building sits. New building sits roughly where the athletic fields sit today. A couple objectives that we were able to achieve with this design and this layout. This allowed us to separate both the parent drop-off and the bus drop-off loops, keeping those two parts of the project separate and distinct from one another. The bus loop will be a one-way drive that will enter close to Coach Lamp and will work its way through the site, allowing students to all be dropped off from the right side of the buses without ever having to cross any other parent drop-off loop traffic. Parent drop-off loop will come in from roughly the same location that today's bus drop-off loop is, off of Indian Rock Lane. The drop-off is going to be able to hold over 60 vehicles, and it's going to allow for multiple vehicles to drop off at the same time, keeping traffic moving quickly. We think this is an upgrade, certainly to today's setup, and hopes to eliminate some of the on-street site drop-off along Orchard Street that we see today. In doing so, we've also added some crosswalks down by Coach Lamp. We've added a crosswalk in the middle of Orchard Street to the small neighborhood that currently has no access or no way to gain access to the current project site. And then we've modified the Ponderosa Indian Rock Lane crosswalk as well, moving that away from the intersection, allowing for a little bit safer passage for children. In almost every approach from this site, you never have to cross any of the paved traffic parking or bus loop if you're a student. As you come up, you can have a distinct path that brings you right to the main entrance without ever having to cross any of that traffic. You can go to the next slide. A couple of shots from the exterior so you can get a sense of what the building finally looks like. We strove very hard to keep the scale of the building small, trying to fit into the residential neighborhood that is your neighborhood. We chose materials that were distinct to Greenwich, using a color palette that mimics some of the granite that you see around your properties, using a wood color, trying to, again, reach a nice warm feel for the children. And go to the next slide. This is sort of the overall view as you come into that parent drop-off loop. This is what you will see. We have some large volumes sort of in the center and to the left, and the administrative wing to the right. You can go to the next slide. This gives you a nice view from Orchard Street. We call this our end of house view. This is the one spot from a residential neighborhood you really see the building. Other than that, with where the building is placed, it's really pushed back away from the main roads, so as not to, overshadow anybody or any distinct property. Go to the next slides. I want to give you a brief look at the inside of the building. On the first main entry floor, you're going to find many of the public spaces and large gathering spaces that are distinct to this plan. So the gymnasium and cafeteria are off to your left. Auditorium and media center really is the central heart to the entire building, with your administrative and your specialty classrooms like wood shop and food and art distinct on your right-hand side. You go to the next slide. As you move your way through the building, you enter sort of a second floor level that is all classroom specific. Each one of these grades is a mirror of each other, so that as the children move from 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, it feels familiar. The knuckles between grades have administrative blocks and counseling areas so that you have both administration that can serve either side, 7th or 6th, 8th or 7th, as well as services for the students right on the same level so they don't have to go downstairs for some of the services that they might need throughout the day. Go to the next slide. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you. Can we advance to the next slide, please? Just a high-level overview of the project schedule and budget. Joe touched on a number of points already. We pulled out a few key milestones here for your benefit this evening, and know that we have a comprehensive schedule with the entire project team, hundreds of lines long, just as we're looking at the complexity of the project and phasing and logistics, assuring that all of the discrete pieces are met. But just sort of a high-level overview of the project is, as Joe mentioned, we are in the bid period right now, having received our approval from the state of Connecticut. This evening here, we have our 7th community engagement meeting. We're expecting the phase 1 construction to begin January of 2025. Towards the tail end of this year, we're expecting groundbreaking, and followed up by mobilization construction start January of 25, with completion by August of 26 in advance of the school calendar year. That then is followed by the demolition of our existing structure from July of 26 through October of 26, with a reconfiguration of the parent queuing space. As we advance through this phased projects, we're going to look at and discuss phasing and logistics here in a moment, understanding how we access and how you all access the site is paramount. Then finally, once the demolition of the existing school is complete, we're able to move into the construction of the fields from September of 26 through the December of 26, with project completion December of 26. As Joe mentioned, our budget for the project is just over $112 million, and we're happy to report we are on budget. Again, the state reimbursement rate at $22 million is something we're tracking very closely to make sure we maximize that for this town. Next slide, please. All right, as I mentioned, logistics and phasing are going to be a key element to this project, in particular safeguarding the safety of the students and faculty, staff, visitors, as well as the contractors on site during this project. And so with that, I will turn it over to Turner and Tim Kleps to walk us through their logistics and phasing plans. Tim?
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everyone. I'll really quickly, as Joe Rossetti had said, my name is Tim Kleps. I'm an executive with Turner Construction. It's important to note that I've been involved with this project since Turner was engaged back in early 2023. So I have worked very closely with the building committee and with the design professionals, with the whole professional team in developing logistics plans and working through phasing and logistics with the team, where the new building's going to go, how we're going to take down the existing building, and how we're going to keep everyone safe in doing so. It's also important to note that this is a very standard practice to build a new school on the same parcel as an existing school. It happens very often throughout the state. I've been involved with several of them myself. So we have a very good level of experience, a very high level of experience in doing such a thing, not only in the school environment, but also in hospitals, in commercial office environments, in many other places where we do perform construction activities on the same footprint, or actually within the same building, where other occupants are physically in. In the first 6 community forums, we spent a lot of time going through the design and how we arrived at the design and the space. Today, we're going to spend a little bit more time focusing on what happens when we start in the field, what happens when construction vehicles start to show up, when the fence goes up, how we're going to keep the CMS community and the surrounding community safe throughout the process. So a few highlights that I'll point out, and I'll go through these rather quickly, just to point them out and show you some highlights. These are 3 or 4 slides of a total of about 13 that were submitted to planning and zoning, that have a lot more detail within them to be able to further describe and explain what will happen in each phase of the project. So phase one is the construction of the new school. A couple of the highlights are the fence and the access gates. So if you look at the blue surrounding, that is an 8-foot high chain link fence with scrim, surrounds the entire project site. We do have 2 entrance gates. We are going to be utilizing the final curb cuts in bus entrance and bus exit for the construction vehicles. So those will be coming off of Orchard Street. Our construction routes to get there are going to be to come off of I-95, use Stanwich Road, follow Stanwich Road past the construction site, take a right-hand turn onto Orchard and a right-hand turn into the site, exiting the site on a right-hand turn and following Orchard back out to Route 1 into 95. Again, using the final intended route of the buses, and again, avoiding crossing any traffic with any construction vehicles for any deliveries that we have. During this phase of work, we have the CMS drop-off and pickup. As you can see from this slide plate, the CMS drop-off and pickup maintain exactly what they are today. We strategically looked at this to try to keep construction vehicular traffic away from parent drop-off and buses. So again, buses in parent drop-off will maintain on Indian Rock during the entirety of phase 1. And construction traffic will go around the parcel of property and use Orchard Street for access. Prohibited deliveries are also another part that we use very often. During drop-off and pickup hours, we do prohibit deliveries from our trade contractors who will be performing work on site. That will be monitored and watched very closely with a sign-up board for deliveries by Turner's on-site construction personnel. We do have lighting and surveillance that we have called out throughout the site. I think there are about 5 cameras and 5 site light poles that we will be using. Current intention is to use solar as long as they work and we have enough lighting, but we will use solar powered lights and cameras throughout the site to again have surveillance 24 hours a day to be able to make sure we have a secure site. Other things that we look at is noise control buffers and restricted times. So we will be working very close with, and I already have received some of the general dates for the 2024-25 school year, as well as the 26 school year with Principal Healy, to be able to tie those into our construction schedule. Again, knowing that right across our site fence is going to be testing to make sure that we avoid conflict and avoid any impacts as minimal as possible to any testing dates that are there, as well as the surrounding community. We'll use around the fence lines for stockpile areas for soil, for material staging areas, again, to avoid being right up to those fence lines. One topic of discussion that's come up is the rock removal procedures. We do have in phase 1 rock removal. One of the largest areas of rock removal are on the top, which is the northwestern side of the new building. Actually, it looks like there's a curb cut over there, but I'll step back and say that is not a curb cut. That is where the utilities, gas, electrical utilities will be coming into the site. There's a large change in grade there, so that is not a curb cut, but it appears to be in this photo. But that is the area of the greatest extent of rock removal that will be taking place on site. That rock removal will be done under a very closely monitored professional engineered plan. They will create this plan based on the specifications that have been created by the design professionals. They have very strict criteria for vibration, very strict criteria for monitoring, and very strict criteria should a rock removal operation exceed any of those criteria, the work is stopped immediately to be able to address that. Protection of the existing building, and I believe there was a question that came through already. If you look at the green area, which is around the newest portion of the existing building, the 1990s edition, there is a 15-foot fence at that location. It has the 8-foot with the scrim, as well as another up to 15-foot with debris netting to avoid anything that could possibly leave the construction site. In addition to that, we do have overhead protection on the other side of the fence, the school side of the fence, to maintain that egress point from that existing building for any fire emergencies that may occur while we're on site. And then finally, a summer phase, a summer sub phase of 2025. Any work that we have, we're going to capitalize on the summer breaks as much as we can when students and staff are not in the school and the school is not being occupied. Again, for any of the work that Steve from SLAM had discussed earlier for crossings and beacons, and any work on the roadway there at Orchard Street will be done over the summer, as well as there's a sanitary connection that runs its way and ties in at Indian Rock. That'll also be taken care of during a summer break in the summer of 2025. We're going to advance one slide. This slide here, I'll hit briefly. After phase one is complete and the new building is turned over, there is a duration of time when the 26-27 school year starts, where the bus entrance, as you can see, is open. The bus exit is open. The parent drop-off loop is not available yet. That can't happen until we take down the gymnasium, and I'll show you that in the next slide. But the key to this slide is during the summer of 2026, we will be relocating our construction fencing, and we will be focused on taking down the 1990s addition to the school, which is on the other side of the Sally Port, up on the northwestern side of the existing school. The reason for that is we need to get that building down and complete the fire lane that makes a full lap around the new school and ties into the circular drive where the parent drop-off is going to be. So this slide is really showing that we're going to be working in the summer of 2026 to be able to very strategically and quickly take that down. And the other item that's on this slide that is being addressed is the rock outcropping that's in the existing site. We will be taking that down during the summer of 2026 as well. Advancing forward one additional slide. Again, this is showing the now fire lane is completely open as you see the loop all the way around the building. So this is showing in approximately September timeframe, early October. There'll be a time where the parent drop off and the routing will be parents are going to use the bus loop, which is that pink line. They'll come in the bus entrance, they'll exit the bus exit. Buses will be using the orange line, which is the fire lane. So they'll be using the fire lane around the existing building and then exiting also at the bus exit. That'll be for a period of time until we can get that parent drop-off loop open. Again, that requires us to take down the existing gymnasium, get the rock outcropping fully out of the way, and do all the hardscape and landscape that's required in that area. If you advance one more slide for me. This is showing once we get the gymnasium out of the way, there is a time where the building will still be here, but we didn't want to show all the slides. This is showing the ultimate, oh, you'd stay back there one. This is showing the ultimate bus entrance exit, the ultimate parent drop off, making its way from Indian Rock up to the circular drive at the school and then dropping back off. That happens around September, early October of 2026. We are within our footprint of our site fence, working on the fields, taking down the remaining portion of the building. And one thing I did fail to mention on an earlier slide is during the summer of 2026, there is the sewer work that needs to happen on Indian Rock. So again, capitalizing on the summer breaks, we will be performing the sewer relocation in the summer of 2026 out on Indian Rock Lane. And the last thing to note on here is the bike rack locations. They're highlighted in here in yellow. So as Steve had indicated, there's ways to get to all the bike racks without crossing any traffic. So you have one at right outside the school entrance, right outside the gymnasium, as well as near the basketball court, the outdoor basketball court. And I think that wraps up. I don't think I have another slide, Jose, right? Yes. So on to Q&A.
Great, thank you, Tim. So I'd like to moderate our Q&A session right now, and note thank you to the public for submitting all of your questions in advance. We will be providing you all the opportunity to submit some live questions this evening as well. We'll talk about the process to do that in a moment. But in the interest of time and preserving kind of as much time to answer those live questions, we wanted to address the pre-submitted questions which we noted of all the questions we received. They find it they fall into three major bundles of questions that we'd like to address this evening. The first being vehicular and pedestrian safety. The second being the safety of the students during construction in the existing building. And then finally, a couple of questions related to the building operations. So first around vehicular and pedestrian safety, there were a number of questions by the public related to egress access onto the site, egress off of the site, both from a vehicular and pedestrian viewpoint. In particular, looking at the speed along Orchard Street. And so I know, Tim, you just walked us through the phasing and logistics plan, which, as by the way, to the public, as we move through this, the entire project team will be working closely with Tom Healy to look at communicating this as we progress through these phases of construction. There will be obviously a lot of signage on site directing people to ease this transition right between these phases. So that's one element of it. But in particular, I wanted to focus on the design, and Steve asked that you address that question.
Sure. I'm going to ask to share screen. That is not the right screen. So I'm going to walk us around the site a little bit. We saw a lot of questions about different areas and different crosswalks and different intersections and questions about those. And I think we can address a little bit of both pedestrian traffic concern as we sort of look at the overall project. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. This gives you sort of an overall view. It's rotated from what you've seen in the previous slides, but gives you an overall view having Orchard Street to the top of our screen, Indian Rock down the side, Stanwich down at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to sort of work from left to right and down and around here. So at Coach Lamp in this area, at this intersection, we've got a crosswalk that's been added. As part of that crosswalk addition, some things that are worth pointing out. We've added not only just a crosswalk, but there are crosswalk signs. There's also some additional striping in the road to give a vehicle heads up that something is happening. Can see some of the dimensional differences. Speeds are a little bit faster coming in this direction than they are coming in that direction. So the rapid flashing beacon signs that are both here and here are tied to the two crosswalk signs. So whenever somebody activates them, these will flash. These are going to be really the primary thing that should catch a driver's attention as they approach from either direction, along with the painted striping in the road. And this really is the first shot of picking up the sidewalk that already exists at this end and bringing students onto our site in a safe manner without having to cross what is going to ultimately be the bus entrance on this end of Orchard Street. So as we work our way down to our bus exit, another crosswalk was added into the project. A few other things occurred down on this end. So this crosswalk, and you can see the photograph, lands right on the small island that is located in the small neighborhood across the street. These folks were landlocked to a point where they had no ability to cross the street and get to the current project site. So this was something we felt was important, is to provide the ability for somebody on this side of the road from this small neighborhood walking access in a safe manner. So in a couple other things we did here. So you'll see the same additional painted striping in both directions. We've stretched that out 50 feet in one direction, 50 in the other. We've also widened this road onto our site. And what that'll allow us to do is add a 2-foot wide textured pavement strip in the center of that road. This is very similar to what is outside of Town Hall. If you're familiar with that, this is going to look very much the same way. We again have rapid flashing beacons at both ends adjacent to the painted striping that are tied to each of the crosswalk signs. So whenever either side is activated, these will flash, should get the attention of drivers, get people to slow down. As we work our way around the site, there were no changes at the intersection of Indian Rock and Orchard. So that remains the same, allowing students to still come, hit that piece of sidewalk that already exists and head down towards our site. We did make some adjustments at Ponderosa. So what happened at Ponderosa, although it's a small shift, it's an important shift. It's almost a 13-foot shift of the crosswalk down Indian Rock. And that gives pedestrians a little bit safer, a little bit extra space at a corner that already is a little bit busy. This is going to provide a little bit more view and a little bit more time for vehicles as they're approaching in either direction to slow down and address this. Speeds on this road aren't what they are on Orchard. We have also added a little bit of striping adjacent here to get people to slow down into one lane. This was a little bit wide for us. You'll see again that same striping on each end of the road, a rapid flashing beacon at each of those locations, again tied to the two crosswalk signs. So when one is activated, so is the other. This again allows someone to come down Ponderosa, cross the street safely, come up the site, enter our site into a spot where you don't have to cross any additional traffic. One additional piece worth noting is that we have our new drive that is located further down Indian Rock. That's also being addressed with a little bit new sidewalk. That curb cut is adjusted. Right now it is the single lane that you see here, although it serves 2 lanes of traffic. We've nearly doubled that. Part of that was for turning radius and for view sightlines. As you come further down Indian Rock towards the ball fields, we close off what used to be an existing driveway into the site. That is now going to be sidewalk and curb. And again, allowing anybody who's on this sidewalk access immediately to the fields. And then no additional work done. I think it's worth noting as part of the bus exit and widening this radius and pulling that street wider, we've also taken down a few more trees in this direction, giving the bus drivers a longer view up that road. We did that from our traffic studies, told us that was the right move. And as Tim already mentioned, it's not just construction traffic that will be one way through here, but bus traffic is the same. They will take the same right-hand turn Tim described, and they will only be able to exit in a right-hand turn. No left-hand turns will be allowed here. So again, in the safety for children and for the drivers themselves. So I think that addresses many of the questions that we had regarding crosswalks, site safety. I think one other piece worth pointing out, I think as we sort of worked our way around the site, I think when you're talking about just pedestrians, I might clip this together. I think this is worth taking a peek at. Again, looking at entry points from the site as you work your way across, I really just wanted to illustrate how a student never has to cross any of the on-site traffic once they get to the sidewalk. So in all cases, as we described Ponderosa, you can come up here, you can follow this pathway all the way across to this larger sidewalk that ultimately brings you right around to the front door. If you're coming from this end of Stanwich, we have a mirrored sidewalk that runs along the parking lot. Up this side brings you to that same loop, brings you right to this front door or to the secondary entrance over by the gymnasium. From the 2 across the way, from the small neighborhood crosswalk, you would stay on this sidewalk, you'd get to that same sidewalk here, brings you right to your front door. And again, from this end of Orchard, as well as from Coach Lamp, you'd be able to walk along this entire sidewalk, never again having to cross either bus traffic or parent drop-off traffic. And for us, that was a real win. I think we felt like we were able to improve a lot of the site logistics for getting the students on site once they're there in the safest way possible. We do provide crosswalks for kids to get back and forth, one side to the other throughout the day as needed. But the idea is to give them one pathway, one way from really any approach point.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Just to add to this briefly, I want to let the public know that the entire professional team did look at a number of options for traffic calming along Orchard. And with as part of our site plan approval that was mentioned, we did work closely with DPW and town officials to make sure that we were in alignment with their requirements and expectations. And so I know that we have Chief Heavey on the call this evening. And Chief, I don't know if you had any additional comments that you wanted to make just to kind of, elaborate a little bit more on what Steve outlined to address the concerns around speed in particular on Orchard.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, again, I rely on my experts. So Sergeant Thorm is with me as well. One of the things that's distinct and separate from the Central Middle School project is that we recently changed the town ordinance in regards to speed cameras. So traffic studies were recently done at all of the schools, public and private, and we'll be taking that data to establish locations for speed cameras. And those speed cameras can be moved when necessary. So as the project changes, if we need to, we can add cameras or move them to make them more effective. I know that became a question that a lot of the public were asking. So we hope to have those cameras at least ready to be installed in the next few months. It's just, we do have, waiting for the results of the traffic study that couldn't be started until the school year started. We wanted to get an adequate sampling of traffic so we get good data.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. The next question for us this evening is around the safety of students within the existing structure. Tim already touched a little bit about our monitoring, seismic monitoring during blasting and some other construction activities on the site. Those requirements are laid out by our our engineer of record within our project specifications and our bid documents, which we're currently bidding, as I mentioned. What I will also add, though, is that the building committee heard loud and clear and has always prioritized safety of the students. And so to that end, have decided to engage with an independent third party, Gap Mountain, who some of you may recognize their name previously, having completed a structural analysis of the existing school, were retained to fundamentally answer a question: is this school safe? Will it be safe to occupy during our ongoing construction activities? And so the Gap Mountain completed their study, had made some very specific recommendations around that, and we are in the process of coordinating that with the bid documents that we have from our professionals and coordinating those requirements and making any necessary changes. So that's where we are with that. We will be sharing, as that document is just recently completed, be sharing it first with the building committee at our upcoming meeting. So that is around the safety of the existing structure. The next item, bundle of questions, we're looking at building operations, and really kind of two questions. And the first is around providing exiting for students from the existing building, paths to a safe area on site, and maintaining a separation between construction activities and the school. So Tim, I just ask if you could speak to that a moment. You touched on it in your logistics again, but if you could just take a few minutes to address that.
Sure. Yes, I mean, while we're performing the work, and I hope that the logistics, I know they were brief and quick to put them up and flash them there, show a clear and distinct separation between the construction operations and the school operations. Much thought has gone into how we set up our site fencing. Much thought has gone into the egress points of the existing building. Principal Healy and I have had many conversations regarding egress, regarding parking, amongst the many other things over the last almost 2 years since I've been engaged here. And it's all around the safety of the students and the staff that are in the school. as we go from one phase to another, again, those clear, distinct delineations between our site and the school environment, again, get reset up. I think Peter had said a few minutes ago regarding the quantity of signage that'll be put up for wayfinding, for ways around the site. One thing I didn't point out is in phase two, there was a question at one point about the student walkers from Indian Rock and how they would get to the new school. We do have identified a temporary walkway that runs on the inside of the tennis courts to be able to allow students to be able to work their way through our site, or not, I'm sorry, not through our site, but on the outside of our site with a clearly marked safe walking path to get from Indian Rock to the sidewalks that are at the new school. Other things that'll happen throughout the construction are going to be daily and weekly. I mean, to the point that Principal Healy and the Turner construction team that'll be on site will become very close with one another. We've done that on many projects in the past where the principal is our key point of contact. He's someone that we talk to very often and very frequently throughout the day, throughout the weeks. We will be issuing updated and modified logistics plans and phasing plans. What I had shown in of the 13 pages of logistics plans that were submitted to P&Z, there will be more to come with that. You know, we will phase the construction from the site preparation, rock removal, foundation works to steel to exterior envelope. Each one of those has their own dynamic features, and we create additional logistics plans to be able to communicate to the school, communicate to the students, and communicate to the surrounding community what is coming within the next couple of weeks to 6 weeks to 8 weeks out.
Great, thank you, Tim. The next question around operations was specifically around the zero waste school program that Greenwich is looking at. I know that's a GPS kind of administrative item and is still somewhat being decided. Dan Watson, I know you're on. I don't know if you have anything to add to that discussion point other than, what I'll say is that within our design for food service, we can accommodate, I think, a couple of different scenarios in whichever direction GPS decides to take on that, but it's really more of an administrative, larger district-wide decision. Okay. All right. Hearing no other comments, I'll now like to transition us into our open question forum. Just a little bit around logistics for this so we can, again, be efficient with the time for everyone. Just ask that if you have a question to please raise your virtual hand in the bottom of the screen. Limit your questions to 30 seconds, please. And then once we've completed any question, once you're completed asking your question, I'll address it to the correct consultant. So I'll open it up now to any questions. Okay, I'm seeing a question from Myra Clocken. I can't see your entire last name.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Myra Clockenbrink. I serve on the Town of Greenwich Sustainability Committee, and I'm a delegate from District 8 to the RTM. And my question this evening is, what is the status of the solar system that was designed into the project? It is our understanding that the panels themselves have been removed from the project in order to stay within budget limits. Is that correct? And can you spell out what the status of the solar system is?
That is correct, but I'd like to defer. I know we're looking to have a solar-ready solution, but Steve, could you field that question, please, from Myra?
Yeah, so the project is designed to be PV ready for the photovoltaic system. So everything is going to be in place to allow for a system to be added and a system to be powered and a system to be connected to the building when the town's ready to make that decision to do so. Everything's been designed to accommodate that, from accounting for the additional load on the roof, as well as pathways to get from roof down into the basement to the mechanical areas in which you'll need to make all those final connections. but it is no longer in the project. It was something that came out as part of a value management effort during the end of our design development phase. And the town has moved that into, I think, a pre-purchase agreement idea.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions from the public this evening? I'm not seeing any.
I see
There's
them
coming
are
in.
here.
There are? Okay,
Yep, there's,
Yep.
okay.
I see
Michael.
Ernst and Katie Nagaki.
Okay, what was, I'm
Katie.
sorry, Laura, what was the first name you
Katie
mentioned?
dot,
So
Okay,
Katie's been unmuted.
okay, great.
Hi everyone. Shiro Nogaki, 219 Orchard Street. Across from the on the Orchard Street exit for the school bus. Just two points. Regarding the fence, you mentioned that it will be 8 feet high, and I believe the location where the bus is coming out, your starting point, there is about 7 feet. I think the height difference between the beginning of the entrance to the exit, meaning I think the field is much lower than the actual road. So when you include, depending on where you locate the fence, we'll probably only have 2 feet of height, that's covering the actual visit. We'll see the school and the construction and everything else that will go on. So I think that's something that I'd like to discuss. And then on top, just sort of on top of that, I know that Steve, I think I've been complaining about the exit just in terms of like the safety perspective. I know you made some changes. I still think the exit requires a little more attention because it's quite a bit of incline. The 7 feet incline it's quite a bit. So when the bus comes out, it's coming out with sort of in an angle. So I think that's something that you may want to consider as a part of when you start to design the actual when you start paving the road on the exit to Orchard Street.
Understood. Maybe I'll start to address your question first, and then Steve, you could jump in
Sure.
and add as necessary. I think Steve did mention trimming of the trees on the under canopy to improve the sight lines from that bus exit. I will note also, we worked closely with the tree warden on this project, preserving trees wherever we could. And in particular along Orchard, a number of trees there were we looked at closely. So what I'll say is, I think to some degree the fence is also impacted by that requirement. And then Steve, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I know that to some degree, I know we're likely changing some of the grading around that area to address the concerns around the elevation, correct?
Exactly, Peter. So the bus exit, the length of bus exit when it turns out of the parking lot and heads towards Orchard Street, there's only about a 3.5 to 4 foot change. We rise from 47 feet to around 51 feet as we hit the road. It's somewhere between 50 and 51 feet when we hit the road. So it's a less steep incline than what's there today for the bus drivers to
Great, thank you, Steve. I understand there are some additional questions, but I can't identify, I don't have a transparency.
Is Ernst Schermer has his hand raised, as does Ellen Wolfson.
Okay. Ernst, could you be promoted, please? All right, very good.
Thank you. Can you hear me? This is Ernst Schermer.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much for this really very helpful and comprehensive presentation. This is a fantastic update. As you all know, pedestrian safety or traffic safety and speeding is my very big concern. So Mr. Martocchio finally seeing some clear images and some details was highly, highly appreciated. I still think around Coach Lamp, that pedestrian crossing, but also further down, I really do think when we have level of service F at Indian Rock Lane and Orchard, visibility is an issue. I go there, I go by there daily, and really 80–90% of the vehicles, almost at most days, early in the morning or late in the afternoon, they look at that stop sign as a yield type situation. So this is kind of a rolling stop, and drivers or pedestrians really can't see well. I had raised back in February when we had a meeting, Mr. Camilla was attending, Chief Heavey was there, and many others. Maybe isn't there the possibility to have mirrors or so, so that one can see in various directions? So on Indian Rock Lane, Orchard, I think we can do better. The separate issue is nearby Stanwich Road and Fairfield, but that's more a DPW question. I just want to comment on that. With respect to blasting, do we have your assurance that no blasting will occur in case there is delays or so over the weekends? And will there be public notice when exactly these blasting moments occur? And then finally, a special request to Tom Healy, when we have election day, and I'll see you at CMS because I'm a moderator. If you can spend 2–3 minutes talking about elections in the future with like the single entrance and so these type of things. But on blasting, I'd like to have an answer, please. But overall, thank you so much. This is really extremely helpful. So thank you for everyone's hard work on this. It's super appreciated. Chief Heavey to come along and give us an update tonight as well is highly appreciated as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we did address your first question in that bundle of questions. And just relative to the additional insights around blasting, as I mentioned, Gap Mountain has completed their report. We have a robust project specification from our existing project engineer, and we'll be incorporating any additional recommendations that Gap has within the bid documents and the project requirements. Now, around timing for blasting in particular, I don't know of any. I don't know, Tim, if you're aware of any constraints around that to add to that. But if there are any restrictions around with local ordinances, obviously those are things we'll be following closely. So.
Yes, Peter. We will be following very closely to the Town of Greenwich noise ordinance and any other ordinances that are in town, as Peter had just said. As for, I think part of your question was communication. There will be very, very open lines of communication. There'll be a pre-blast survey done. Again, they will request any of the neighboring properties to be able to survey the property, again, asking for permission to do so. They'll be monitoring, as Peter said, with the specification requires very detailed monitoring at the existing school, but also all the surrounding areas. In communications, each one of the blasts, as we go through there, will be scheduled. It will be communicated. There will be horns that are sounded before any blast takes place. And all that will be written out and shared with the surrounding community.
Thank you, Tim. I see a question from, let me see if did the hand go down? Ellen Wolfson, was that right?
Yep. It's Ellen.
Okay.
Thank you, and appreciate the information provided by the committee. I've spoken to the committee previously, and I do appreciate the additional crosswalks that have been set on Orchard below Coach Lamp and the one opposite the Nagaki's house. I live at 15 Coach Lamp, and I'm concerned about how one safely navigates on foot from Coach Lamp to Indian Rock. And related to that is, when would we expect that these crosswalks with the illuminated flashers be installed?
Tim, do you have or perhaps Steve, maybe a question for the timing within the project schedule when we expect to those improvements to be complete?
We haven't locked down the exact date of that. That would be some of the work that we would try to capitalize on summer recesses because we would be out the roadway. I would envision on Orchard Street that work happening during the summer of 25 and finishing up in the summer of 26 after students go for the summer recess. So I would imagine you're going to see a little bit in 25, a little bit in 26, both during the summers. And again, some of the work that happens on the curb side of it, right in the breakdown side of it, may be done during the school year. But again, that'll be very closely coordinated. But knowing your concern, we can look at getting those in place sooner than later.
And Peter, I'll take the other part of the question about sort of getting from Coach Lamp over to Indian Rock. It's an improvement from where it sits today in that you now have pathways on site that'll allow you to sort of cross from Coach Lamp over Orchard and then safely traverse your way over to Indian Rock. And there's a variety of different ways from the slide that we showed previously. You could do that in a longer way and never cross traffic. You could do that partly without crossing traffic and then crossing some of the traffic that's happening in the parent drop-off loop to shorten that route depending on which end of Indian Rock you'd like to go. But I think today it's a safer path than it will be a safer path than it is today.
Thank you, Steve. I do not see any additional questions. So I know, Joe, you had a couple of closing remarks, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure. Peter, thank you very much. I want to thank all our panelists very much for a concise, clear, informative presentation. I also want to thank our community for joining, our neighbors and community for joining us tonight and participating and hearing about the progress. Again, a final suggestion or invitation to join us on Tuesday mornings, every 2 weeks, Tuesday morning, for our building committee meetings. They're virtual and available to everybody. And again, use the website, the Greenwich Public School website, to access other additional information. With that, I really appreciate everybody's participation. No objections. Claire?
I have a motion.
Save the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Second, Joe. Thank you, Joe Kelly. Our meeting's adjourned 3 minutes before 1 hour. So thank you very much, everybody.
And the
See you
video
around town.
posted to the Greenwich Public School website shortly, probably tomorrow.